Black billionaire is told to sit in economy. What happens next leaves passengers stunned. When Elijah King, a self-made black billionaire known for his investments in tech and clean energy, boarded the flight from Miami to New York, he was dressed as he always was. A well-tailored black suit, custom Italian leather shoes, and a calm, composed presence. He moved quietly as if he were any other passenger, but the gleam in his eyes hinted at the layers beneath his cool exterior. For Elijah, humility was second nature. He knew who he was, what he'd achieved, and he had no need to flaunt it. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. As Elijah made his way down the aisle toward his first-class seat, he could feel the curious stares of passengers. It was the type of attention he was used to, the double takes, the subtle narrowing of eyes, the assumption that he didn't belong in first class. As he neared his seat, a flight attendant in a crisp uniform stepped into his path, a polite but firm smile on her face. "Sir," she said, glancing down at his boarding pass as though certain there was a mistake. "I believe you're seated in economy. This section is reserved for our first-class passengers." Elijah blinked, momentarily taken aback by her presumption, but he quickly composed himself, showing the calm grace that had helped him climb to the top in the world of business. "No," he replied smoothly, holding up his boarding pass. "I'm actually seated here in 1A. The flight attendant's eyes flicked to the pass, and her face tightened just slightly. Despite the clear indication that he was in first class, she hesitated, then gestured towards the economy cabin. "There may have been a misunderstanding, sir. Perhaps you could make your way to the back while we double-check?" Passengers nearby watched with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. Some whispered to one another, glancing at Elijah with dismissive expressions. One businessman in a designer blazer sitting a row away even chuckled under his breath, saying to his seatmate, "Looks like someone's trying to upgrade on a budget." Elijah gave a faint smile, choosing to ignore the judgment. He had long learned to handle subtle and not-so-subtle dismissals with grace. But then another flight attendant, this one a senior attendant who recognized him instantly, stepped forward. Her face brightened as she approached. "Mr. King," she said, her voice warm and welcoming, "we're so glad to have you with us today. Please, allow me to assist you to your seat." The junior attendant's eyes widened in surprise. "Mr. King?" she repeated, a hint of embarrassment creeping into her tone. Realization dawned on her as she registered the weight of his name. Elijah King wasn't just another businessman. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country, known for his influence across multiple industries. The businessman who'd chuckled earlier froze, recognition settling in. Elijah King wasn't just a name, it was a legacy. Known for his philanthropic efforts and his empire in tech and clean energy, he had transformed communities around the world, creating jobs and uplifting countless lives. Elijah nodded to the senior flight attendant, then turned to the junior one. "Thank you," he said politely, his calm voice carrying a certain gravitas. "But I believe she was just doing her job. We all make mistakes." His tone was gracious, his words designed to diffuse any further discomfort. Passengers nearby exchanged stunned looks. The humility and forgiveness he showed, despite the initial treatment, only added to the respect many felt in that moment. As he settled into his seat, Elijah reached into his briefcase and pulled out his laptop, focusing on his work as the plane began its taxi to the runway. But the experience hadn't gone unnoticed. Whispers circulated through the cabin, some people checking their phones to search his name, realizing who they'd just witnessed in action. Elijah could hear murmurs of, "That's Elijah King, isn't it? And I can't believe they didn't recognize him." The man who had mocked him earlier finally couldn't hold back. He cleared his throat awkwardly and leaned toward Elijah. "Mr. King, I apologize for what I said earlier. I didn't realize." Elijah gave a courteous nod, offering a small smile. "No harm done," he replied, meeting the man's eyes with a steady gaze. Respect shouldn't depend on someone's title or bank balance. The flight passed smoothly, but the impact of Elijah's reaction lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. When they landed in New York, A young woman seated a few rows back approached him in the terminal, holding out her hand. "Mr. King, I saw what happened on the flight," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "I just wanted to say that seeing how you handled it really inspired me. Thank you for reminding us that grace and strength are something we can all aspire to." Elijah smiled warmly, shaking her hand. "Thank you," he replied. "Remember, sometimes the way people treat you says more about them than it does about you. But how you respond, that's where your strength lies." As Elijah moved toward the baggage claim, he couldn't help but notice a commotion behind him. The junior flight attendant who had initially dismissed him was standing with the airline manager, her face flushed, eyes darting between the manager and Elijah, as if hoping he wouldn't notice her distress. "Mr. King," the manager called, striding over to him with an air of urgency. "Could we have a quick word? We owe you an apology, and I want to address what happened on the plane." Elijah looked back at the young attendant, catching her nervous gaze. He saw her discomfort, the unmistakable regret that shadowed her expression, and he felt a twinge of compassion despite the incident. But the manager's demeanor made it clear he wasn't going to let the matter slide. "Mr. King, we take these matters very seriously," the manager continued as he walked beside Elijah. "The behavior you experienced was inexcusable and goes against everything we strive for in terms of customer service and respect." The attendant shifted nervously. She stammered, I didn't realize, I thought—" Her voice trailed off as the manager raised a hand, silencing her. Elijah put up a hand as well, intervening gently. "Look," he said calmly. "It's true her behavior was inappropriate, but everyone deserves a second chance, especially when they're willing to learn." He looked at her with a level, compassionate gaze. "If we reacted harshly every time someone made a mistake, none of us would have the chance to grow." The manager nodded, though he remained visibly agitated. "Mr. King, we appreciate your understanding, but we still believe this situation warrants disciplinary action. We have policies in place for this kind of conduct, and it's crucial that we reinforce standards." "Of course," Elijah replied thoughtfully. "Policies are important, but maybe a better approach would be an opportunity for her to understand what respect and kindness look like, no matter who someone appears to be." The manager paused, taking in Elijah's words. Finally, he nodded. "Understood, Mr. King. We'll ensure she undergoes additional training in customer service, with a focus on understanding the impact of unconscious bias." The young flight attendant looked up, surprised but visibly relieved. She stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly as she addressed Elijah. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm truly sorry for my actions. I misjudged, and I'll work to be better." Elijah offered a kind smile. "Remember, it's not about where someone comes from or what they look like. It's about the respect and grace we give each other. I think you'll learn a lot from this." As he walked away, Elijah felt a sense of calm. The situation could have escalated, yet he chose a path that honored his principles. He could hear people in the terminal whispering, some clearly awed by his patience and grace, and the young flight attendant, no longer dismissive, watched him walk away with new respect. When Elijah finally exited the airport, he left behind not just the stunned silence of passengers and staff, but also a powerful message: that the true measure of a person lies not in their wealth, but in their dignity and the dignity they extend to others. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.